Hi there. I'm Rothy, a woman in my 20s. My husband, Raymond, is the same age as me. We're married, but we don't have any kids. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we decided not to have children to enjoy our time as a couple. As our third anniversary approached, we started considering having kids. But then, something unexpected happened. My younger brother was getting married, and our parents helped him with the cost of building a new house. They kindly offered to give us some financial help, too. With that, we planned to build a house in the next couple of years. But then came a request to live together with my in-laws and my sister-in-law. We had discussed living with my in-laws when we first got married, but I had declined, wanting to judge if we could get along with them. I had set some conditions if we were ever to live together. That sister-in-law would have to be married and move out, that if she ever got divorced and came back, we wouldn't live together, and that the land deed would be in my husband's name to avoid any potential disputes. My sister-in-law was still in college and wasn't looking to get married anytime soon. I didn't have a bad relationship with her, but she's the kind who doesn't respect personal boundaries and would snoop around our stuff. I really didn't want to live with her and was searching for a gentle way to decline. Raymond said he'd handle it and tell them our decision. It was a relief since I was worried about making things complicated if I addressed it myself. However, even after this, my in-laws kept pushing us to live together. When I mentioned that Raymond had spoken to them, they acted like they hadn't heard anything. In fact, they countered, he seemed open to considering it. I was baffled by their response. From their tone on the phone, it seemed they were equally, if not more, puzzled. Given my mother-in-law's reaction, I didn't think she was lying, and there was no reason for her to do so. That night, when I discussed it with Raymond, he said he'd make things clear, but I still felt uneasy. We both work, earning about $90,000 annually. While it might seem enough thinking about having kids, it's not really a comfortable amount. On top of that, if we ended up living with my in-laws and they expected us to financially support them, it would be a problem. I was really anxious about whether Raymond would convey all this to them. Sure enough, my intuition was spot on. A few days later, he brought up this proposal. How would you feel about tearing down the house your parents live in now and building a new one there for us all to live together? Before building the house, the land should be under your name. If not, we'll have issues later on. If it's a multi-generational home, the part we live in should be in your name. Otherwise, if I'm paying and get nothing in inheritance, I'd be at a loss. If we're building a home with the support of my husband and my parents for us and my in-laws to live together, I thought it'd be fine for them to give him the land. I was afraid that after my in-laws pass away, sister-in-law might claim rights and make the house-building effort pointless. However, the in-laws rejected both the land gift and the partition. Just because you're our daughter-in-law, it's weird if you provide the money and the house becomes yours. Since we're putting in money, we must think long-term. What if we divorce? What if we stop living together? Any property loss would be irreversible. Being a daughter-in-law makes me even more cautious, but my in-laws and sister-in-law only insisted on their perspective. I thought living together would be fine once the land issue was sorted, but I realized my husband wouldn't navigate this well. Given sister-in-law's invasive nature, we decided to live separately. However, my husband's stance remained vague. Months passed with no change, and when I confronted him in frustration, he said, flustered, "We're going to discuss this weekend. I can't decide alone." To make progress, we arranged a meeting at my in-laws' place over the weekend. Yet, during the meeting, he would agree with whatever I said, and whatever his parents said, without ever taking a definitive stance. Exasperated by his agreeing to both our opposing views, I called off the new house plan. We have opposing views, and we're getting nowhere. Building a house is impossible now. You four can discuss as you like. After leaving my in-laws' house abruptly, I came home and made my stance clear to my husband a few hours later. I am no longer interested in building a house under these circumstances, whether we live together or separately. And just so you're clear, I won't be contributing a single dollar. If you want a home to live in with your parents, you'll have to fund it yourself. Rather than defending or opposing, the husband seemed hesitant and said little. A few days later, my sister-in-law showed up. She immediately burst into tears at the doorstep, berating me for being a terrible wife. Wanting to avoid causing a scene for the neighbors, I reluctantly let her in. How could you abandon your parents? You devil! I won't leave until you change your mind about building the new house. That's already settled. We're not building anymore. At first, my husband tried to calm the situation, but as sister-in-law continued crying and pleading, he began to side with her. After all, both our parents were looking forward to it, and I can't bear... Do you intend to keep them in that old house for much longer? Their parents' house was about 50 years old, with a leaky roof, creaky floors, and probably wouldn't last another decade. Sister-in-law confronted my husband, asking if he planned to make their parents' life miserable. Gradually, he started to agree with sister-in-law's points. Fed up with their behavior, I interjected sternly between my husband and sister-in-law. Do you honestly think you can get everything you want without compromising? Deals work when both sides benefit. This isn't rocket science. Talking to you two is like dealing with stubborn children. You throw tantrums and become immovable when things don't go your way. I'm contributing the money, so of course I have conditions. It's audacious to reject those and then demand funds without spending any of your own. If you're so concerned about our parents, why don't you start contributing once you get a job after college? Stop trying to use others without any sacrifice on your end. And causing a scene right at the front door? Don't you realize it's a nuisance for the neighbors? I wish you'd think before you act and speak. Given the recent events and your lack of consideration, I've realized living together is out of the question. How do you not get that? Feeling overwhelmed by my determination, sister-in-law went silent. My husband couldn't bear the tension. He said he'd drive sister-in-law back to their parents' home and left. During this absence, I called my close friend to confide in her. I confessed my dilemma, whether to take some time away from my husband and his family, hoping time would mend things, or to persistently seek understanding through conversation. My friend responded, "You might be unwavering in your stance, but they probably won't bend their beliefs either. Believing that through discussions everyone will understand each other is merely an illusion. There are countless people in the world who will never share your viewpoint. You either need to put distance between you or consider divorce. Otherwise, you'll just end up being used for your money." Those words solidified my resolve. Deep down, I already knew that mutual understanding with my in-laws was unlikely, and I knew that not everyone would come out of this happy. I genuinely believed that we had fostered a harmonious relationship over the generations and even felt comfortable with the idea of living together. It was daunting to think about impulsively divorcing my husband, whom I once desired a life with. I had hoped to resolve things amicably. However, I couldn't ignore the realities. Whether I chose divorce or continued with the marriage, I needed money to live. I couldn't risk losing it. If you don't stand your ground, especially where money is concerned, you'll regret it. There's no way this can be resolved smoothly, she advised. Following my friend's suggestion, I took precautions like moving my banking cards to a safe deposit box. My husband had returned around the same time. Over the next 2 days, we had a lengthy discussion. I understand where you're coming from, and it does make sense, but when I hear my sister and parents, I feel they have a point too, he admitted. My husband had a tendency to respect everyone's opinions, almost to a fault. To be frank, he lacked firm beliefs, easily swayed by others. This often put him in the crossfire, making him an easy target from both sides. Recognizing his lack of self-awareness about this trait, I confronted him. You agree with me when you listen to my side, and you side with your family when you hear theirs. You're not fully supporting either of us. This isn't neutrality. You're just flipping sides, turning into a traitor. It's easy to label your nature as empathetic and genuine, but in this situation, being easily influenced isn't a virtue. What do you want? Do you want a life with just the two of us? Or do you also want a life together with your family? I always thought it was okay to live with just you, or even with our parents. As they're getting older, I felt guilty making them stay in that old wooden house. You weren't keen on it, but I sensed you were warming up to the idea of living together. But what you said to my sister earlier opened my eyes. We were just using their property for our gain. I thought it'd be a win-win with them getting a new home and us saving on land costs. But making you and your parents pay for 2/3 of it to ease our worries? That's not right. I don't mind living together, but you do, don't you? Given our future, I understand why it's tough to build a house on their land and live with them, especially when they won't even consider meeting our terms. I get why you might not even want to build a house anymore. I feel guilty for complicating things. I regret not having a firmer opinion. Then let's discuss it again with your parents. If we can't find a solution, we'll distance ourselves from them. I won't be used by them and won't just silently comply. If you side with them even once during that discussion, I'll consider them your only family and won't rule out divorce. Who is your real family? You're the reason I got married. I see you as my family, and I prioritize our life together. So I consider my parents as another household. If you want to distance ourselves, I'll respect that. I'm ready to give up on trying to please everyone. Following that, my husband and I discussed our future approach. We first clarified what distancing meant. He suggested living an hour or more away from his parents' place and only visiting them during New Year's celebrations, weddings, or funerals. I pointed out that unless there's emotional distance, it won't make a difference. What if we meet them for New Year's and they pressure us about living together again? Without that emotional barrier, it's pointless. As a result, we decided not to engage with them except for weddings or funerals until they are no longer mobile. However, if they reach a point where they can't move and my sister-in-law can't care for them, my husband wanted to assist a little. I am not heartless. For my husband, his parents are the only family who raised him. It would be cruel to abandon them. I wasn't planning to stop him. By the weekend, we met again at his parents' place to discuss. We can't just give away the land. It's my inheritance. My asset. If we're bearing the financial burden, shouldn't the title be in our name? Isn't it unfair otherwise? We're family. What's wrong with it being a shared asset? Do you realize how irrational father-in-law's argument is? He doesn't contribute a single dollar, but just because it belongs to someone he's closely related to, he claims it as his asset. Moreover, I don't share any blood relation with you. If something unpredictable happens, like a divorce, and I end up losing money, it would be a problem. It's not that easy to just say divorce. You just don't go and do it right away. It's just a hypothetical. I am making a point. People might view divorce as a bad thing, but it can also be a means for both parties to find happiness. As an outsider, I need to consider such risks. To begin with, the reason our conversation even reached this point is because you won't agree to terms and are just trying to use our situation to your advantage, right? It sounds terrible when you put it like that. We just said if you buy the house, we want to live there too. How else would you describe letting someone else pay, not compromising on anything, and trying to get a house for free? It's exploitation, and you're just taking advantage of the situation because of my daughter-in-law status. We said we'll cover our own living expenses. What's the issue if we live together? From this situation, I've come to see how unreasonable your demands are. Misunderstandings like this will only increase if we live together. If every issue becomes this big, it'll wear both of us out. Wouldn't it be better for both of us to maintain a moderate distance? It's not fair to say, we'll cover the building costs and you can pay for your own living expenses. If we're paying for the construction, we should own the house. It's ridiculous that you won't contribute $1 to the construction cost, but want the house in Dad's name. It would be different if it was an inheritance or something, but this isn't even a property related to Dad's lineage. You're just trying to get a share of someone else's property. We're still family, aren't we? Don't conveniently use the term family. Once you get married, your spouse becomes the priority. We are not family here. Sharing assets doesn't make us family. Anyway, we don't plan on living with you or building a house for the time being. Despite our efforts, we couldn't see eye to eye and decided to distance ourselves from the in-laws. We set our home phone to display caller IDs and decided not to contact the in-laws unless it's an emergency. However, 2 weeks later, the in-laws confronted my husband at his workplace, demanding to know why he wasn't communicating and why we had abandoned our plans for the house. My husband honestly explained his reasons. Why don't you look deep within and ask yourself? We set the terms for building the house, but you didn't budge an inch. We're the ones paying, so you should at least consider our terms. We're not making any unreasonable demands. My wife's covering 2/3 of the costs, and I'm covering the rest. It only makes sense that any parts she's contributed to have her name on it as an asset. You won't compromise on the terms, won't contribute financially, and don't offer any solutions. And yet, you expect us to build a house on our dime and let you live with us. Don't you think that's a bit too audacious? Besides, who storms into someone's home or workplace just because things didn't go their way? You need to think like adults. We'd prefer to distance ourselves from people like you. With that, he managed to fend off his livid parents. However, it seemed the entire ordeal had drained him both mentally and physically. I never thought they'd go as far as showing up at my workplace. He was utterly disappointed in his parents. Given the inconvenience of their intrusions, we decided to move. Our ties with my in-laws were virtually severed. My husband seems to have no intention of interacting with them until they pass. In our new place, we bought the dream home we had always wanted, and life returned to normal. During our discussions, we were prepared for a potential divorce. In fact, several friends suggested we part ways. But after talking it out, neither of us wanted to throw away everything we'd built together. We felt the desire to support each other as long as we could. Through this experience, my husband reflected on how easily he's swayed by others, and has since become more assertive in expressing his opinions in our daily life. Now, our bond is stronger than it was before this incident, and our relationship has improved. We've been discussing starting a family soon. We hope to be blessed with a wonderful child. We aim to respect each other's views and live happily together for the rest of our lives.